Hi, Dr. Dave here to cover everything you need to know about fouls in pool. Everything I will cover is based on the WPA and BCA official rules of pool. Some pool league rules deviate from these official rules slightly, so be sure to be aware of the differences. All available rule sets and lists of differences are available via the links in the video description. First, it helps to know what defines a legal shot. The tip must hit the cue ball only once with a forward stroking motion. The cue ball must contact a legal object ball first. You must pocket a ball or drive something to a cushion after cue ball object ball contact. So this is a foul. If the object ball is already touching a cushion, something must be driven to a cushion after contact. So this is also a foul. Here's another foul because the cue ball hits the cushion first, just in front of the frozen 8 ball, and nothing is driven to a cushion after the cue ball hits the 8. Here's a similar shot, but because the 8 comes back to the cushion, the shot is not a foul. In this example, I am forced to kick off multiple rails to hit the 8. This shot is good because something, in this case both the cue ball and the 8, are driven to a cushion after the hit. But this is a foul, with nothing hitting a cushion after the ball hit. That's too bad, because this would have been a good safety otherwise. Pocketing the cue ball during a shot is a foul. It's called a scratch. Jumping anything off the table is also a foul. For a shot to be legal, at least 1 foot must be in contact with the floor during the hit. This shot is a foul because both feet are in the air with my weight fully on the table. You are allowed to use your body parts and cue to visualize and aim a shot, but you are not allowed to place the cue down on the table without having a hand on it. You are not allowed to use anything else as an aiming aid. For example, using a piece of chalk like this is not allowed. You must also not interfere with normal play, for example by bumping the table to help a ball drop in like this, or by blowing on a ball like this. And if the ball hits something you left or dropped on the table, even accidentally, that is also a foul. Unless playing under all ball foul rules, it is not a foul to accidentally bump an incidental ball during a shot. In this case, your opponent has the right to leave the ball where it lies, or replace the ball to where he or she thinks it was before being disturbed. If your opponent is unethical or doesn't like you very much, they might not remember very well where the ball was originally. But if you are careful to not bump balls that you shouldn't, this sort of thing can't happen. If you bump a ball by mistake or on purpose, and it interferes with any balls during the shot, then that is a foul. It is okay for a ball to temporarily leave the playing surface like this. And it is even okay for a ball to land on top of a rail, as long as the ball doesn't hit any non-table object, like a cube of chalk, and as long as all balls not pocketed come to rest on the table playing surface. Now let's look at the most common fouls that make a shot illegal and result in ball in hand for your opponent. The most common foul, that is also often the most misunderstood, is a double hit. A double hit, where the cue tip hits the cue ball more than once during a shot, often happens too fast to see, but it can be clearly detected by watching how the cue ball reacts. Here are some common examples. Here, watch how the cue ball does not hesitate at all and follows forward immediately with a lot of speed. This can happen only with a double hit. Sometimes a double hit can be avoided by elevating the back of the cue like this, but this offers no guarantee of a legal hit. This shot is clearly a foul based on how much the cue ball goes forward before drawing back. But just because the cue ball goes forward with a shot like this does not necessarily mean it is a foul. For example, this is a good hit. The cue ball went forward quite a bit, but this was obviously a legal shot. Here, there is a small gap between the balls, and the cue ball is hit at an angle relative to the object ball, but this shot is clearly a foul based on how forward the cue ball goes. As we will look at in more detail later, this is not possible with a legal hit. Here's an interesting shot where it is impossible to pocket the 13 with a legal hit. But if you don't know the following trick, an unethical opponent might take advantage of you. The Q-tip did not double hit the cue ball, but it hit the 13 during the follow-through. The cue tip is allowed to hit the cue ball and only the cue ball, and it must do so only once. Now let's look more closely at how to detect double hits. With a straight shot, with a near center ball hit, the cue ball should nearly stop. If the cue ball goes forward, especially with speed, the shot is obviously a foul. With an above center hit, the cue ball will go forward, but it will hesitate slightly, like this. Did you notice that the cue ball did not go forward immediately? If there is a double hit, the cue ball will not hesitate at all and will go forward with speed, like this. With a fairly level below center hit, the cue ball will not go forward at all. Here's an example foul. Did you see the cue ball go forward? With an angled shot, the cue ball should initially head in the tangent line direction, which is perpendicular to the object ball direction. With a stun shot, where the cue ball has no top or bottom spin, the cue ball will remain along the tangent line. With backspin, the cue ball will draw back from the tangent line. Did you notice how the cue ball started along the tangent line before curving back? With topspin, the cue ball follows forward of the tangent line. But again, with a legal hit, it still starts along the tangent line. If the cue ball goes forward of the tangent line immediately, the shot is obviously a double hit foul. Here are some examples of bad hits with different types of spin. Now let's look at techniques you can use to avoid double hits. When the gap between the balls is really small, the only reliable way to avoid a double hit is to shoot the cue ball at an angle. As long as the cue ball starts off in the tangent line direction, the shot is legal. As we saw before, with a larger gap, it is easy to avoid a double hit by elevating the cue. But even a highly elevated cue is no guarantee of a legal hit. Don't let anybody tell you, "I elevated the cue and the cue ball drew back, so it isn't a foul." If they want to argue with you, show them this part of the video. When using side spin, it is much easier to avoid a double hit with an inside spin shot. Here, I plan to use inside follow to get shape on the 8 up table. The double hit is very easy to avoid here since the cue ball is coming off the object ball in the opposite direction as the cue tip is coming off the cue ball. It is more difficult to avoid a double hit with outside spin since the cue tip is starting in the same direction as the cue ball off the object ball. This shot is a foul. Did you see how the cue ball went forward immediately and more than it should have for this type of shot? One relatively easy way to avoid a double hit is to use a short bridge and short stroke like this. When the gap is small and the shot is short, you might be able to get a good hit just by tightening the grip like this. Did you notice how simply tightening the grip and arm sent the cue forward very slightly? When the gap is small, a double hit can sometimes be avoided with cue elevation, but the cue needs to be nearly vertical like this. That shot was actually a double hit, but when it is too difficult to tell visually while watching the shot, assuming slow motion video instant replay is not available or an option, the benefit of doubt would go to the shooter. Another technique to avoid a double hit is to use your grip hand to stop the stroke against the rail. First position the tip close to the cue ball, then slide your grip hand forward so it is touching the rail, and then stroke into the ball. It might hurt a little, but it works like a charm. For shots that are difficult to reach like this, a good option is the following technique. First, position the cue on the table pointing in the required direction with the tip close to the cue ball, keeping a hand on the cue at all times. Then form a bridge close to the cue ball and grip the cue with your fingers close to the bridge. The bridge hand, which should be firmly planted on the table, will stop the forward motion of the cue to prevent a double hit. When the cue ball is frozen to the object ball with no gap whatsoever, you are allowed to hit straight into the cue ball. Such a shot is legal since it results in a single hit with no push. If you don't believe me or the rules, see the super slow motion videos via the link in the video description. You can see the cue ball immediately separate from the tip, even with this regular video slowed down. Whether you hit the cue ball above center, in the center, or below center, the cue ball still goes forward. Although, you can slow and stop the cue ball's forward motion with bottom spin. If you are, or were, a snooker player, you might think it is legal to hit the cue ball away from the object ball with the initial contact counting as a cue ball object ball hit, but that is not the case in pool. The cue ball must move an object ball for it to count as a hit. That would have been a good safety in snooker, but this is a foul in pool. A good legal option here is just to thin the 8, although I still need to hit the end cushion for no foul. If you know about the twice as full aiming system linked in the video description, it is fairly easy to control the cue ball with frozen ball shots like this. You just first decide where you want the cue ball to go, and then you aim twice as full as this with a center ball hit. Here, the line through the balls points to the left side of the pocket, so I am using left spin to prevent cut-induced throw to the left that could cause a miss with a center ball hit. The left spin also helps send the cue ball off 2 rails with soft speed for shape on the 8. Here's an interesting shot where I need elevated follow to clear the obstacle 3 to pocket the 11 and get shape on the 8. A shot like this almost always involves multiple hits, but it is impossible to detect visually or based on the action of the shot, so it is not a foul. Did you notice that the shaft touched the 3 ball after the hit on the cue ball? As discussed earlier, this is not a foul if you are playing under cue ball fouls only rules, which are common. Did this shot look like it involved multiple hits between the cue tip and cue ball? It is impossible to tell, but if you look at the cue ball after the shot, you will clearly see a line of multiple chalk marks and traces on the cue ball, clearly indicating multiple hits. But again, this type of shot is not a foul, even though it typically does involve multiple hits. Now let's look at another common situation that arises where it is important to know how to detect a foul or not. It involves determining which ball is hit first. Here, shooting solids, I need to narrowly miss the 13 to pocket the 8 for the win. If I hit the 13 first, this shot is a foul. With a shot like this, it can be extremely difficult to see visually which ball is hit first, but if you understand how the cue ball should react, it is easy to detect a wrong ball first foul. If I hit the 8 first, the cue ball will come off the tangent line of the 13 and head this way. And if I instead hit the 13 first, which would be a foul, the cue ball would come off the tangent line of the 8 in this direction. That's how you detect a foul here, by watching which way the cue ball heads. Did you see the dramatic difference in cue ball motion between the legal hit and foul? In a situation like this, it can help instead to visualize how the object balls should move differently for a legal hit versus a foul. Here, I again need to barely miss the 13 to pocket the 8. If I hit the 8 first, the cue ball will come off the tangent line and send the 13 this way. And if I hit the 13 first, it will head this way instead. Here's a good hit. And here's a foul. Did you notice that I pocketed the 8 ball with both shots? One shot gives me a win, and the other shot loses the game. Pool is often a game of millimeters or small fractions of an inch like this. Here's a fun challenge based on knowing the effects of which ball is hit first. All 3 balls are touching, and it looks like it would be easy to pocket the 13 by hitting the 9 and 11 at the same time. The problem is, it doesn't work unless you hit the 9 and 11 at almost exactly the same time, which is extremely difficult to do. Because of this is a good proposition shot to challenge an unknowledgeable friend or a foe. Make a bet that he or she can't pocket the 13 in 3 or even 5 attempts. He or she might think it's an easy bet to win, but he or she would be wrong. If you hit the 9 first, even barely, it will send the 13 far from the pocket. And the same thing will happen in the other direction if you barely hit the 11 first. I decided to give the challenge a try to see how many attempts it would take for me to pocket the 13. It is possible that I could get extremely lucky and pocket it on the first try, but it is also possible that it would take me an extremely large number of tries before I hit the 9 and 11 at very close to exactly the same time. The only way to know your expected make percentage would be to try to shot 100 or 1,000 times and keep track of your results. I was able to pocket the 13 on the 12th try. This is a lot tougher than it might look. I was aiming very carefully, and I was sure my aim looked good on each and every one of those shots, but the hit must be perfect, which is tough to achieve. Give it a try and see what your make percentage might be. A miscue is caused when you try to hit the cue ball too far from center, as with the following examples. Super slow motion videos available via the miscue link in the video description clearly show that miscues almost always involve secondary contact with the tip, ferrule, or shaft. However, a miscue is not considered a foul unless the secondary contact is visually obvious while viewing the shot in real time. Here's an example miscue where the secondary contact is visually obvious. The shaft clearly hits the cue ball after the initial hit with the tip. Even if the cue ball had hit the 11 into the pocket or a cushion, the shot would still be a foul. In this example, an intentional miscue can be used to pocket the 8 in the corner, which would not be possible with a legal hit from this angle. An intentional miscue is considered a more severe violation than a normal foul. In tournament play supervised by a referee, it would be ruled as unsportsmanlike conduct, which carries a stiffer penalty like automatic loss of game, or worse, at the discretion of the referee based on your previous behavior. Here is another unsportsmanlike intentional miscue foul because it is not a legal forward stroke. The tip is placed under the front edge of the cue ball and lifted straight up. There is no obvious double hit between the tip and cue ball, but such a shot is not legal because the cue is not sent forward into the cue ball. Here is another illegal intentional miscue used to shoot a disguised safety. Again, an intentional miscue like this is considered unsportsmanlike conduct. If it weren't, this would have been an effective safety because I froze the 8 to the cushion, which would limit my opponent's options. In this example, if shooting stripes, it is fairly easy to pocket the 8 by jumping over the 5 with a legal jump shot, where you hit down into the cue ball, causing it to bounce off the table. However, it is illegal to scoop under the cue ball like this, which usually involves a miscue. If I were instead shooting solids and was attempting to pocket the 5 past the 8 to draw back to break out the cluster, a miscue, which would be unintentional here, would not be a foul, assuming I hit a solid first and drove something to a pocket or a cushion. This shot is not a foul because of the unintentional scoop jump, but it is a foul since I hit the 8 first shooting solids. The final foul I want to look at is a push shot, where you prolong tip contact with the cue ball with a non-natural stroke. Here's an example where the cue ball is frozen to the 11 and I don't have a direct shot. Earlier, we saw how the twice as full system can be used to send the cue ball to the 13 for a legal shot. An illegal way to shoot this is to push the cue ball through the 11. I just touch the tip to the cue ball and slowly push the cue ball forward. That is an unsportsmanlike conduct, intentional push shot foul since there was no stroke into the ball with a single well-defined hit. This is a shot we saw earlier that I pocketed with an illegal intentional miscue. This shot can also be cheated in with a push shot like this. Here, you can clearly see the action of the shot, touching the cue ball with the tip and pushing through. Again, this is a foul, and just as with the intentional miscue, it would be considered unsportsmanlike conduct. Here's a final push shot example, which is again illegal and unsportsmanlike conduct, but it is a fun proposition shot. Challenge somebody to pocket the 13 with a level cue without moving the 8 or hitting a rail, and then show them how easy it is. You just need to touch the tip to the center of the cue ball and push forward and then to your right a little to easily clear the 8. If you really want to test your knowledge of pool rules, take the online Pool Rules quiz. It includes videos of 100 different shots where you need to decide if the shot is a foul or not. Check it out via the link in the video description. It's free. Well, I was obviously not able to cover every possible thing that can go wrong with a pool shot to make it a foul. So be sure to read the rules under which you play so you will not be surprised when questionable situations arise in the future. Good luck with your game, and good luck with the Pool Rules quiz from Dr. Dave.